welcome to episode 96 of the Backlot 605 podcast. I am one of your hosts. I am Casey Kelderman.
I'm Brian Mensing.
And Brian, we are continuing.
My name is Cory Jacobsen.
It is Cory Jacobsen. He's here. I was going to do a big introduction for Cory, but I think he's very excited to talk about this week's movie.
Yes, I am.
Yes, he is. That is Cory Jacobsen, as you heard him introduce himself. We are very excited to have Cory back. It's been what, 2 months since we last had Cory on. It hopefully will not be that long this time around.
Right.
Yeah, that was kind of a long episode, but I mean, it was for a great movie, and also I felt the need to throw in the Pink Angels into the mix, so it probably could have been cut shorter than that.
2 musicals in a row with Cory. What a weird turn of events for us. That was not planned, but that's fun.
That works.
Yeah.
So we are continuing our 1980s fantasy miniseries. Last week we covered The Never-Ending Story. This week we are covering Labyrinth. So Labyrinth is this week's movie of the week, I guess. So we're going to talk about that a little later on in the show. But before we get to that, we're going to talk some box office and movie news and what is coming soon. So let's kick it off with the box office, because this is a pretty big week for new release movies and for what could be determining how movies do at the box office going forward. Number 1 this week is Tenet.
Whoa, shocker.
With $20 million opening week. What do you guys think of a $20 million opening weekend for Tenet, opening up in, to my surprise, 2,800 theaters?
If this was 2019, that would be a box office bomb for Tenet. In 2020, that is probably the best thing they could ever hope for.
Yeah, well, actually, I think if I'm not mistaken, they were hoping for around 30, and that was the projected, but it ended up being 20, but still, a lot of places just are not open. So people are going from, one location that usually gets everything, say like New York, and going to a small theater in New Jersey to see this movie because it's not opening in New York. You know what I mean?
Right.
A lot of people from LA are taking the trip to Las Vegas to go watch it. Like whether it be for just enjoyment or for work, they have to go out that way.
Well, the other thing I'm thinking of is just for the sake of how theaters are doing the social distancing and what seats are available and what not available. Because you figure, like myself, I went to go see Tenet by myself, and that alone, basically, you can guarantee that there is 10 seats to my 1 seat. So my 1 ticket basically cost them 10 seats. So, there's the hill there, I think they're running into. It's like, you can project for 30, 40 million or 25 or whatever the case is. But if that one guy picks that 1 seat and you have how many people go by themselves, you basically just killed, how many possible income out of that. So I think they were overshooting.
Right.
30.
This is a scary number to look at. If this is 2019, maybe add a 0 to that, and you're probably closer to what Warner Brothers wanted it to be at. Probably not 200 million, but you know what I mean. They were leaning more towards over $100 million opening weekend for this movie than a $20 million. Best case scenario, this of releasing the movie right now, this is probably the best case scenario. But again, this leads me to wonder why. Why did we release this right now? From everything that we've heard about this movie, we're hearing at one point there was a report of with marketing and production and everything like that, it was an $800 million budget on this movie, and for them to make $20 million opening weekend, not great. And this is over the long week as well, because it opened with early screenings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's taking into account those numbers too.
I also picture that, we're so used to seeing movies out of the theater within 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on, with that 90-day window between theatrical and home release. This will be in theaters easily until probably, I imagine February, March next year. And I've said it before, they're going to play the long game with this one and keep this in theaters for as long as absolutely feasibly possible.
Well, because they have to. That's the thing. You can only factor in home videos so much, and you can only factor in overseas, which it seems to be doing pretty well. And I think it had like 120 million from overseas. So, I mean, that's helping a lot. But the one number that, while it might not be necessarily the thing that they're getting money, but they like to say, oh, it made over 250 million in its first weekend in the United States, and they can't say that with this.
Right.
It looks like a bomb because people don't look at worldwide stuff as much. So
yeah, I just pulled it up. 126 million international.
Right.
The thing, a couple things on this, because I know we all watched it, and I kind of want to talk with us three about our thoughts on the movie. But before we get to that, Warner Brothers has another big release coming out the first weekend of October, which is Wonder Woman 1984, which will indefinitely knock Tenet out of its big theaters, out of the biggest screen possible at like for us at the Cinemark. This is going to get the XD theater. This is going to get the bigger theaters. I don't see Tenet staying in the theater past December this year. I think Nolan probably wants it to stay in theaters forever, but it's just not going to happen, especially with right now the word of mouth is not it's very split, the word of mouth on Tenet.
And I was just going to say, you have the usual, and I want to make this sound as not as best as possible and not terribly condescending, but even with like hardcore Nolan heads, it's like, oh, it was great, I didn't understand it.
So there's going to be those people that are going to go see it multiple times because of that. So that's like one thing that's actually working towards their favor. You have people like Derek who's seen it 3 times already.
Yeah, so let's get into our thoughts. I think we should jump into that because one, all three of us have seen the movie. No spoilers or anything like that. I want to hear your guys' kind of overall thoughts on Tenet. Cory, I'll start with you.
I thought that it was a perfectly fine 3-star film. If anyone knows me personally, and I've kind of hinted at it he does not make movies for me. I like a little bit more of an emotional aspect to it. I like a little bit more character to the films that I want. I want to feel as if I have had my mind changed or I've gone through a journey and not just a weird little masturbatory puzzle. And that is what Tenet is to me. And Nolan in general, to me, is just kind of, oh, well, you made your puzzle. That's cool. And I realize that there are a lot of people that really like that, but it's just not for me. And I'm not going to make fun of the people that really dig it. But, I mean, to me, my favorite Nolan movies are, I really liked his remake of Insomnia. I think that is very good. I will always hold Memento in pretty high regard. I think The Prestige is a very good film about Nolan as a filmmaker. And despite some of the way that the movie was edited, I respect what Dunkirk was. I think that is a fantastic film that didn't necessarily need to have these weird timeline shifts. I think it would have worked just as well as a straightforward film. But Tenet is just Nolan doing a puzzle movie, and it just wasn't a puzzle movie that I really thought was all that great. But like I said, I still would give it like 3 stars. perfectly watchable. It just is not a movie for me.
Brian, what'd you think? I have not actually heard too many of your thoughts. You kind of left it very brief in our major group chat we had about Tenet. That we couldn't spoil for Andy the fat dude.
Well, that was also part of it, because I was like, Andy hasn't watched it yet.
Andy, plug your ears.
If there's one thing definitely about this movie, and this can be said about like even Inception, is that Nolan is very ambitious. Nolan is in that frame of mind right now where he's like, I made a big movie. I need to make a bigger movie. I need to make a bigger movie. How do I make my movie bigger? And I see where he was trying to go with this, and it's an interesting take on time travel and manipulation of time and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, too, there was so much going on. You can obviously tell Nolan is a very smart man. The problem is he has I think he has a difficult time relaying that to someone who is like me, not that smart, and to be able to try to get his idea across to the point where you're spending so much time trying to understand certain things that you miss other things. And I do think it was a pretty solid movie. I think that he had so much in his brain he was trying to get out on the screen, and there were things about it that were just kind of, a little off-putting. The part where you figure out in terms of the inversion of the main character, I was like, I caught it right away. I knew exactly what was happening. So, just the look on Robert Pattinson's face told me exactly who was behind that mask. So, it didn't leave me to that wow moment of going, oh, I didn't see that coming.
I laughed during that reveal, because I'll go off what you said, Brian, because you said Nolan is very smart and that the audience is not as smart. I think it's the opposite. Nolan thinks he's super smart and doesn't have any he has no what's the word I'm looking for? He doesn't trust his audience enough to figure it out. He feels like he is smarter than the audience. He's like, well, no, you need to watch my movie multiple times to figure out what I'm doing here. It's like, no, you're just a bad storyteller, and you need to relate to your audience in one time watching this. Like, movies should be able to be understood in a first time watch, and then further appreciated in multiple watches. It shouldn't take you 5 watches to figure out what's happening. I for the most part, I feel like I have the story figured out. It still doesn't make any goddamn sense. And I think that's, I'm gonna say something because I know Cory has said it one. I believe it was the first time we had Cory on, and we went off on a tangent on Nolan. And I don't remember which Nolan movie you were talking about, but this is all the line I could only think of while watching this movie was, it was Christopher Nolan masturbating, and you said that about Interstellar or Dunk. It was one of those last 2 movies. Yeah, that's how I felt watching Tenet. It feels like a student film script that was given $200-300 million to put into production by a great director, terrible writer. Nolan needs someone else to write with him. I feel like he was talking down to the audience the entire time. It's super lazy and very arrogant to name your main character the protagonist. It's like, get out of here. No, like, you are just, I did not like Tenet. It felt like Nolan was too far out of his own reach at this point. It felt like, I'm going to make a Nolan movie because I'm Christopher Nolan and that's all I care about. And the fact that he was so persistent about putting this into theaters right now, that part's what it is, but this is.
I love that I am
movie.
Like the weird Nolan diplomat in this thing, all things considered. I love that. That's great. Because I think for a while I've been the one that kind of gets crap for supposedly not liking Christopher Nolan. I do. It's just, it's that whole Einstein quote of, if you truthfully understand an idea, you should be able to explain it to a 3-year-old. And I think that Nolan kind of has these ideas, but they're very simple ideas. So he adds different things to them to make them more complex and more complex than they need to be, so that, he can have an $800 million movie and have to have a bunch of people go back and see it multiple times in order to understand it, when really the basic conceit is perfectly understandable, but there's so many other things that are added on to it. And we could probably go on all day about the movie Tenet.
Probably could have done a whole episode on Tenet.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a palindrome. Get it?
Yeah.
It's the same backwards and forwards. I think something like Primer is a better example of this movie, and that was made for considerably less money. So, but Tenet is still good. I think I am in the middle of you two, at my sort of medium 3-star thing. It was perfectly watchable. I would recommend people that are huge fans of Nolan, you're going to get a kick out of it. It's a fun little ride, and that's it. I'm not going to think about it much anymore.
Yeah. For a movie that makes you want to think, I have not really thought about the plot besides being angry at what Nolan was trying to do. And that's
right.
Before this, I like all of Nolan's movies before this, and then this is the one that kind of just broke me. Like, I'm like, oh no, it has put a different perspective on every Nolan movie before this now. And thank you, Cory, for that. I'm not. It was the one line you said, and it just stuck with me the entire movie. And I thank you for giving me that line to think of.
You ruined it for him.
I know, but there is the concept that I always appreciate what Nolan is, because he is doing, along with Paul Thomas Anderson, a style of movie that does not exist anymore, which is that big, grand Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, grand, you need to see this on the biggest screen possible type of film. And most filmmakers do not err more on the side of, say, a Kevin Smith or a Woody Allen, and not this grand, what you're doing, and could you use a better screenwriter? Yes. But as far as filmmaking goes, what you're doing. There are some beautiful shots, and I just, I've always liked Paul Thomas Anderson more because I connect with the characters. But I will always appreciate what Nolan is able to do with the budgets that he is given.
Yeah, I'll leave off on a positive note before we go to the number 2 movie in our box office. It is a beautiful movie to look at, and you have to see it on the biggest screen possible. You need to have it with the loudest speakers possible. I think Nolan does put a heavy emphasis on sound. I mean, especially in this movie, for better and for worse, but you need to have it on the biggest screen possible with the loudest speakers possible. And yeah, it's a spectacle to look at. And yeah, I still will probably be there opening weekend for the next Christopher Nolan movie.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, despite the fact that I've had some negatives to say about him, I mean, dude, I went to see the movie.
Right.
So Nolan won in this argument.
That he did. That was the plot of Tenet. That's what he wanted to do this entire time.
He got my $3.
All right, let's move on to number 2 then for this week. This is last week's number 1, The New Mutants, which took in $2.8 million here in its second weekend out. Briefly, Brian, you and I watched this. Did you like New Mutants?
I didn't mind it. The one thing about New Mutants that is going to be hard for other people to probably have a little bit going into this is there is no pre-set up story. When we were talking about like First Class, we had a premise of the originals. They're pretty much going off a whole brand new property, brand new characters. We've never met these people before. So I think they had the whole battle in the first place. I think with all the delays and everybody's concern is that if you're going to be a good movie in the first place, does not help. And the reshoots, the script changes, stuff like that, it definitely was, you could tell that there was problems with it. I don't necessarily believe it's all on the cast members of what those problems are, because I think the cast members did exactly what they could do with what they were given. Um, Overall, I would say anybody who's a fan of the X-Men franchise or people with superpowers or whatever the case is at least it's a fun watch. It's weird. It's definitely not your atypical X-Men movie. So, you know, for that respect, I think they did a decent job for what they had.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun watching this. It's 3 years too late, which is very obvious because the original release date was almost 3 years ago. There are tie-ins to a movie from 3 years ago that don't work now because that universe doesn't exist anymore. We're past it. It's a relic of the past. This X-Men universe that the New Mutants is set in, but I had a good time with it. It's not a full X-Men horror movie. It has some horror elements. It has enough of that. I think the cast is really good in this movie. I would like to see more of them. I wish there. I mean, it was planned that this is going to be a trilogy. I wish we would have gotten that. That would have been fun. But it's a fun 90 minutes X-Men horror, low budget movie. I mean, there's 6 cast members in the movie. It's a pretty tight movie, and that's about it. It's kind of middle of the road X-Men movie overall. It's not Days of Future Past or X-Men 2, but it's
also not X-Men United.
Or what's that? X-Men United?
Yeah.
That's X2.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. The Last Stand.
No,
sorry.
It's not that.
Yeah, it's not The Last Stand.
It is not. I think it's right down the middle. It's good. I probably
Agreed.
I wouldn't say rush out to theaters. I would say buy it on Blu-ray or rent it on VOD when it comes to that.
Or a second run theater.
Or on Disney Plus in a year.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I still wish I would have put $20 on New Mutants coming to Disney Plus or theaters, because that at least would have made $20 off you, Casey.
You would have, but you should have done it. But let's move on.
Should have done it.
Let's run through our next ones very quickly, because there's one in the box, not in the box office for this week, that I do want to briefly touch on with us three. Number 3 is Unhinged, $1.6 million. Number 4 is The Personal History of David Copperfield, bringing in over $360,000. And then last but not least, at number 5 is the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, $345,000.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, SpongeBob.
Why is this still in the top 5? Why is this still in the top 5?
It should be. I'm still excited to watch that. But there's one not in the top 5.
I didn't even know they released it, so.
It released in Canada only. We did.
It released a month ago.
Yeah, in Canada. So yeah, we are not getting it theatrically. But yeah, one that is not in the top 5 for this week is Bill and Ted Face the Music. I briefly want to touch on that with us three, because we all watched it together for one, which was fun.
Yes.
And I think,
socially distanced apart.
Yeah, I think all three of us are on the same page with this movie.
I absolutely enjoyed this film.
Yeah. This is a perfect Bill and Ted 3.
Yes.
As I was speaking to Casey beforehand, the little tiny nitpicks that I had about the movie they're still there, but they no longer matter. And it has gone up considerably in my mind. I think it is a joyous experience. It is exactly what I wanted from a movie about middle-aged Bill and Ted.
Yes, exactly. And, it went into the movie knowing exactly what it was going to be, and they didn't try to overdo it. They didn't try to, make it more than it actually was. They knew that the people are going to go to this movie, they're going to enjoy this movie, but it's not going to be a $200 million movie.
And it also, it does what it does. And we're not going to go into this movie, but I watched Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. I did not like that. But this was completely different in the fact that there were in that particular movie, there are literal winks to the camera. This was not a movie full of, that thing that you really liked from The Thing? Here's the thing again. It was its own beast. You can watch this movie without having seen the other two for a very long time and still get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The two daughters are just pitch perfect. Samara Weaving is really good. Yeah. I even like Kid Cudi in it, and his weird, possibly knowing way too much about time travel station sort of thing that he had going on. And there's just, it's a joyous film. It ends with a bunch of people playing along to the I think it's the Weezer song. I know this Weezer song is in the credits, but just a bunch of Bill and Ted fans playing along to the song, and it just ends perfectly. I know it's become a cliche to say this is the movie that we need right now, but motherfucker, this is the movie that we need right now.
Agreed.
Yes.
Though I do have to say something which you made me think about here. We didn't bring up when we were talking about Tenet here, but about the song that they're playing, the Weezer song that is kind of the lead single for this soundtrack, which number one is a fantastic soundtrack. I have had that.
Ooh, I need to check that out.
Yes, they have it is a fantastic soundtrack to Bill and Ted Face the Music, but at least Weezer going into being in part of a Bill and Ted movie makes a hell of a lot more sense than Travis Scott having the single for Tenet.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
watch.
And Travis Scott is a dude that I like. I like Travis Scott, but
agreed. But it's when I think of Nolan, I think of like Hans Zimmer, and I think of big scale and everything
exactly.
else. And there's literally no other soundtrack to that song, to that movie, except for his one thing, and that's in the credits. I'm like, who did you pay to get into this thing? But outside of that, sorry, that's what made me think about that when you talked about Weezer. I'm like, oh, speaking of which, myself personally, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, in terms of everybody that was partaking in this movie, even though Kid Cudi seemed a little bit of an odd placement, he was a fun odd placement. Like,
right.
again, he just starts going off talking about these things that like no rapper, actor, person probably in the human world would ever know, and he just starts talking about physics and shit.
Right.
But no, like, even though you and I differ on Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, and that's completely okay, is that
it's okay. Yeah.
it's okay. Is that no? I think with Bill and Ted they did exactly like you kind of said, is there's nods to the originals, but you don't have to necessarily have seen the originals to still get the appreciation outside of just knowing about it. Between the going through time, getting the different instead of it being for the class project, it's for the band. They go through the whole heaven and hell like bogus journey kind of thing, i.e. without the heaven part of it here. But there's those straight nods to it. But then at that point, it's still itself. It's still its own film. I do have to say I absolutely appreciated the small nod and how they were able to incorporate Rufus and incorporate George Carlin even for the hot second that he's there.
Right.
For me, that was literally like the little ribbon on the bow that basically says, we can't make this movie if we can't figure out how to at least get him somehow incorporated into this.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really it's a really fun movie, and I think if you are in any way a fan of the Bill and Ted movies, or you just want to feel good about humanity in general, this is the movie for you.
Well, and it's got Dave Grohl.
Spoilers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, this is the movie 2020 needs. I think this is.
Yeah.
I was preaching it for a while on the show that this is the movie we like. Every other movie should have moved aside for Bill and Ted to be the first movie. It was the second new release I saw, so that's close enough. But this is easily the most fun I've had in the movie theater all year. It's not the best movie I've seen all year, but it is definitely the most fun I've had watching a movie. I had a smile on my face the entire time. I loved hanging out with Bill and Ted for 90 minutes again. And I think that's the biggest part of it is when you watch the Bill and Ted movies, it's not necessarily you're laughing out loud for 90 minutes, but you're smiling and having fun hanging out with Bill and Ted.
Right.
Exactly.
And that is the great balance
Yeah.
that this movie finds. And I love this movie. I can't wait to probably go check it out again here in the theaters or watch it at home within the next couple days again. It's so much fun. All right, let's move
Right.
on to the news since Bill and Ted was not even in the box office for the week, but we had a scene for
Jerks.
Bill and Ted, which is all right. Let's move on to the news for the week then. Brian, we only have a couple news articles. Not a whole lot going on.
The little itty bitty news that we got going on, and maybe this is me the asshole, but one of these I think is completely irrelevant. And that is
take COVID-19 seriously, damn it.
That's not the thing I'm talking about. The first thing we have in here is that Philip Seymour Hoffman's 17-year-old son is to star in the next Paul Thomas Anderson movie. So I went to go look him up. This is his only credit. Mm-hmm. And at this point right now, all I see is some kid trying to make a name for himself off of the passing of his father. Like, where are we going with this here, other than the fact that he's Philip Seymour Hoffman's kid?
Hot take.
Right.
Yeah, I'll go the exact opposite. I think it's PTA and Philip Seymour Hoffman were great friends. Obviously made some great films together. I think this is him giving Philip Seymour Hoffman's kid a chance. And I'm sure they've known each other for his entire life too.
Probably.
And I think PTA is one of those directors where he is going to look at this kid and not say, you need to be your dad. He's going to say to this kid, you need to be you, and I need you for this part. It's not going to be, I need you to be the next version of your dad.
And if that is the case, then I honestly I hope that it is. I hope that it's Paul Thomas Anderson giving the kid the break if this is what he wants to be and this is what he wants to do. If he wants to be an actor and try to become his own thing, absolutely let that be forth, because at least, if anything, at least he's got a good director to help him get there.
And with Paul Thomas Anderson, for me, I have a feeling, and I know that it's been very secretive, and a lot of his movies are kind of secretive, but not in the same way that Nolan is. It would not surprise me if this kid was cast for a reason, because he is playing the son of someone who was famous, and that's the point of his casting, and they're going to factor that into the emotional depth of the character. And if you can get that kid into the mindset, because he's already there, of using that emotion, it could be a brilliant performance. And I'm a diehard Paul Thomas Anderson fan, so I'm biased. I mean, really seriously, if Hard 8/Sydney is the worst movie that you've ever made and that's still really good, yeah, you're pretty much a cool director in my mind. But I will pass judgment on the entire thing once. I think that this was a little bit too soon, and they needed to write about something because there's just nothing going on.
Right.
But I don't think that this is a story. I don't think that this should ever have been written about. I think it is, I think initially it probably should have just been, you watch the movie, you get to the credits and go, Hoffman, oh, was that his kid? Instead of it being like a story.
Agreed.
Can I read the IMDb synopsis for this movie? Because, Cory, I am assuming you have not read it.
I have not.
Okay. You are almost spot on, my friend. Set in the 1970s San Fernando Valley, the film follows a high school student who is also a successful child actor. So I would assume that is the role that Cooper Hoffman, Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, is taking on in this movie.
Right.
But then at that point, to the respect of like what Cory was saying about the emotional connection here, you're talking about somebody who this is his first film, has not been a child actor. So where are they going to get that, that connection to, other than the fact that he's just, Hoffman's kid? I'm also looking at I'm looking at the cast for this here too, and I do kind of get a kick out of it because I mean, obviously we got Bradley Cooper to be the linchpin to be able to get people to go see the movie because it's Bradley Cooper.
Right.
We have a Safdie brother in there, which is obviously after Uncut Gems, that's gonna pull some people's names in there, and then we got Alana Haim. So it's like because he's big, huge. Like he does pretty much all of their music videos. He's like, well, now I need to start throwing other people in there that I know. So I want to see more to see if this is going to be anything worthwhile. Because agreed, yes, it's not like Paul Thomas Anderson makes shitty movies. He by far does not. But like right now, there's just not enough for me here outside of Hoffman or anybody that's cast to make me go, okay, I'm in. I need to know more. There's just not enough here.
But then, of course, you go off of something like The Master, which up until its release was touted as, oh, this is Paul Thomas Anderson's Scientology film. And you realize that that's kind of a MacGuffin when you get in there and realize that, no, it's actually a very deep character study about these damaged people that just happens to have this concept wrapped around it. And so I trust that he's making something really interesting, but
well, you look at
there's always
going back earlier in his career too. You look at Boogie Nights, like, oh, it's the PTA porn movie. Yeah, that's what it's about, but that's not why it's so highly regarded. It's about the characters in that.
It's that guy from the Funky Bunch.
It is the guy from the Funky Bunch and his Dirk Diggler. Yeah, that's. But again, I think PTA is one of those directors that can pull out great performances from anyone in his movies, and I think this will probably be no exception. This is a great cast in this movie, very eclectic cast, and I think he does that quite often in his movies, which that excites me. I think the Philip Seymour Hoffman thing is definitely more so of he wants not really a meta take, but something that can kind of put us in as audience members into connecting with this kid, because you probably with PTA you probably could have gone with like a Disney Channel star or something like that to fill in the child star role or something like that.
Right.
But why not get one of your friends' kids to do this? Like that just makes sense to me.
And that's where I'm saying that if that's the case, where if this kid wants to be an actor, he's got the best connections to be able to have PTA be the person that's going to help him launch a career and help be that driving force that's going to drive this film and drive his career, then more power to him and best of luck to him too.
All right, what's the other boring news we got to talk about?
The other boring news, the Batman, Robert Pattinson. They've had to stall production yet again on the Batman film because Robert Pattinson tests positive for COVID-19. So, after all these, aspects of things being taken place to be able to try to get productions back into go here, it doesn't sound like it's gonna the delay is going to hopefully make too much of a pause that's going to cause a whole lot of issue with current release and whatnot. But it just goes to show that Hollywood still needs to figure out everything to be able to identify issues, concerns, because when it's literally your top bill is the one that's being affected, that's literally causing delay. That's impacting other jobs, that's impacting other people, timelines, stuff like that. It's a huge thing. So hopefully the rest of Hollywood is taking note from this so that they can do their own thing. Because from what I understand, where they're shooting in the United Kingdom is not too far from where they're currently shooting Jurassic World Dominion. After they get done Batman, there's when they're going to start doing the Flash in that same area. That hopefully they're all taking this news very seriously to figure out what they need to do to continue making it so they can start making movies again.
Right.
Yeah, I hope Robert Pattinson has a speedy recovery. I'm sure he will be fine. Batman, wear your mask the right way from now on. You are forgetting the most important part of the mask.
We'll watch Matt Reeves' Batman be the first time where we see Batman where his cape and cowl covers his entire face.
Yeah, damn it, Batman. But this leads me to a question where I think I'm wondering why productions have not done this, because a lot of them are beginning to start back up, and they've started up, in the last month or so. A lot of them. Why aren't more of them taking the stance of like the NBA right now, which is basically, you guys are in this bubble, you can't leave until we're done with this season.
Well, and
why do they not try to do that more? Because that seems like that should probably be the way to go with a set. But again, with a movie, shooting a movie is very different than playing a basketball game, where you're all in the same spot using one court. That's it. But with a movie, you have multiple locations, multiple sets. I understand that part, but then maybe it's not time to start shooting your movie yet.
So one of the things I was reading when I was reading about an article about this whole thing, and kind of going on to the Jurassic Park Dominion, again, like I said, they're shooting not too far from the same area where the Batman is shooting. They actually rented out an entire hotel for all of the staff, or the basically the key actors and all the key staff, and all of the staff members of the actual hotel themselves are all getting tested 3 times a week, kind of thing, to the point where at least it sounds like they're doing just that. They're basically saying that if you're not here, you're in your bubble over here. So hopefully more of them will see that that's a good way to do it, because as crazy that whole like Tyler Perry like boot camp thing that he was doing, where he was shooting like 22 episodes of his show in like 11 weeks in a quarantine little bubble. But you know what? He's found a way to be successful at it, to be able to get shit done. And, it's rigorous and whatnot, but it's getting the job done. These people are having jobs and they're getting paid. So, they just need to find that happy medium of what can we do to be able to make our movie and make it look like a good movie without getting people sick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think this won't be the first time we hear it. This is probably the biggest one we've heard as far as productions go. There has been other so far, but again, I guess the big story was that if this was like Joe Schmo, production assistant on the Batman, we probably wouldn't be talking about it. It's the fact
we wouldn't
that
have
it's
even
Batman,
heard about it.
It's Batman himself,
right.
And I think that's the news story.
Yep.
Again, we'll probably be hearing this, for as long as we're going through everything with COVID-19. So this won't be rare news. I think that we're going to hear this quite often as movies begin production again. All right. So that's all we got for news.
That is it.
Pretty breezy week for news. Let's jump into coming soon. Also a pretty breezy week. There's not a lot coming out. The big weekend was obviously last week with Tenet and Mulan both dropping. But coming soon this week, we have first up, which we talked about last week. We talked about the trailer that just dropped. This is dropping on Netflix September 10th. This is The Babysitter, Killer Queen. McG returns to direct. Samara Weaving maybe is in this movie. Probably not. But The Babysitter, Killer Queen. Me and Brian, we talked about it quite a bit last week. Corey, what is your thoughts on The Babysitter, Killer Queen?
Okay, I just saw the trailer for it. Probably, I want to preface this by saying that I don't usually watch a lot of trailers. I will get around to it usually about a month afterwards. But I got a little handy list of what we're going to be talking about, so I watched all these, and I did like the first one. This one looks like it continues the vibe of the first one, so. And, it looks kind of like it has that weird satanic panic vibe of, a good mixing of, and if it's like The Babysitter, a good mixing of comedy and horror, gore. And, I'm sure it's going to be fun. I appreciate what McG did with the Charlie's Angels movies. I think his little foray into Terminator Salvation was not the worst of the bunch. I'm down to watch it.
I think Casey's big reservation is Samara Weaving. I think if Samara Weaving was cast in this, if she was in the trailer and everything like that, he'd be like, I'm going to be watching this on the 10th of September.
Yeah.
I think that's Casey's. Myself personally, for me, I even enjoyed the ensemble cast that was even surrounding the kid and Samara Weaving. I enjoyed them all in the first one. I look forward to them returning into the second one. One thing, and this is just me just picking out little nuances that I just think is funny, is that these people are supposedly dead, but somehow Bella Thorne is somehow able to get her nose piercing between the first and the second film while being dead. But that was just something I just noticed is all. I don't know. I'm hoping that the little tease shows that it is Samara Weaving and they were basically playing coy this whole time. That she was too busy for it to be able to make this one here. So I'm looking forward to being able to watch that this upcoming weekend.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll wait to hear what everybody thinks of it because I love The First Babysitter. I think it's my favorite McG movie. Yeah, I want to see what everybody else thinks about it first.
It's because it's a McG movie making a horror movie, so it's right up Casey's alley.
Half of that is correct, Brian. The next movie we got coming out here is The Broken Hearts Gallery, which hits theater September 11th, which is a rom-com drama, which is produced by Selena Gomez. It stars, I'm going to definitely
You are going to butcher this name.
I'm going to definitely mess up her last name. I apologize. I believe it is Geraldine Viswanathan, who was in Blockers. What was that, 2 years ago? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yep. So she was in that movie. This is a rom-com about an art gallery assistant who puts together a gallery of items from her past relationships and then invites others to her art gallery to do the same. It also stars Dacre Montgomery, who was in Stranger Things seasons 2 and 3, who was in the Power Rangers movie. Yeah, what did you guys think of this trailer? I like the two leads. This is not my genre to watch. If it was on Netflix, I would think about pushing play. But in theaters, I'm unfortunately out. What about you guys?
I'm intrigued. It's an interesting concept, and like you said, the two leads, I'm in for those two. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence.
I really hope that the movie is good, but the pure concept screams Lifetime movie to me.
I talked about it a few weeks ago on the show. It has the Netflix formula of the rom-com, and that's what this was like. And like I said, if it was on Netflix, just because I like the two leads, I would think about pushing play. But I'm not going to go out to the theaters and watch this.
It seems, not quite as high concept as Last Christmas, but I'm getting similar vibes from this, and I really hope that maybe there's a really cool screenplay to it, and just the pure concept will be overcome with, oh, this is actually really well written. Good job.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I think
we're not really seeing that in the trailer.
Yeah. And I completely spaced that this was a movie coming into movie theaters. I thought this was another Netflix original.
Yeah.
Oh, hell no. No, I would never pay money to see this. No.
Yeah.
I will watch it when it comes out on streaming somewhere and probably think it's fine and never think of it again, if I remember that it even exists.
Last up we got here is an HBO Max exclusive, comes out September 10th, which is Unpregnant. This is described as the comedy version of last spring's Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which follows a Missouri high school senior played by Haley Lou Richardson, who gets pregnant and enlists her friend to travel with her to Albuquerque, New Mexico to get an abortion. This also stars Breckin Meyer and Giancarlo Esposito. So what did you guys think of this? Again, I think we are not the demographic for this one, but it is on streaming, so it has that benefit.
Yeah, I was watching the trailer. I'm like, I was all for wanting to see The American Pickle because I've got HBO Max, and I still have yet to get around to watching that. And Maybe. I mean, there's a few instances of the trailer that made me chuckle, made me go, okay, this might be a fun little watch, but is it on is my list of saying, okay, I got to watch that this weekend? No, I think I'd rather be watching Babysitter right now than watching this.
Yeah. I mean, it's so sad because, I mean, and I'm not trying to belittle the Babysitter, but yeah, it's a really slow week when like the top one and the most important one is the sequel to the Netflix original movie, The Babysitter. Um, and it wasn't like, woo! I didn't give a full-on Ric Flair, woo! When I saw the Babysitter trailer, it's like, oh, well, that looks fun. I guess I like the first one. But it just got kind of, I like this one, the trailer for this more than I liked the trailer for the previous one. This one kind of gave me some weird like Booksmart vibes and since I just watched that again recently with my mom, it's like, oh, that gives me warm fuzzies because I loves me some Booksmart. But yeah, it didn't really make me go, woo, I need to see this. This looks awesome. But I'll probably check it out. Sure, why not?
It kind of seems like this whole week's coming soon. It's like, yeah, sure, it's coming out. Like that's kind of seems like the general consensus for this week is, oh, we got Tenet and Mulan last week, and then this week.
You know, for being a podcast about movies, you'd think we'd be more optimistic so people would watch movies as opposed to not watching movies.
Hey, go watch Bill and Ted.
Yeah. Go watch Bill and Ted. Go watch Tenet. Yeah. I think a lot of people will get some enjoyment out of Tenet. Yeah, but or what you could do is you could go watch Labyrinth and then come back and hear our discussion on Labyrinth.
Look at you! Look at the transition there.
I like it. Well, I'm gonna piggyback off that, and we'll be back in just a minute to talk about Labyrinth with Cory Jacobsen, Brian Mensing, and myself. We'll see you in just a moment. Casey here again. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to our horror-themed podcast, The Killer Countdown, that I co-host alongside Blake Ginnathan and Sam Lenz. This show is nearing the end of its run, the final chapter, if you will, as we have a few episodes left of that show. So be sure to go check out some of our latest episodes, including Best Final Girls, Best Creature Features, Best Horror Scores. Again, this is nearing its final run, which we will announce a little special something that we have planned for this final chapter. But stay tuned. Once again, that is the Killer Countdown, available right now on this podcast feed. We are back on the Backlot 605 podcast, here talking about 1986's Jim Henson directed film, Labyrinth.
The Labyrinth.
So Labyrinth stars David Bowie, Jennifer Connelly. Oh boy, let's talk about this movie, guys, because I've been excited to talk about this one. We're talking 80s fantasy movies for this entire month of September. Cory, Brian, Labyrinth. Let's talk about your guys's. Do you guys remember your first time watching Labyrinth, and what is your history with this movie? I'll throw it off to our guest first, Mr. Cory Jacobsen.
Okay. I think that Labyrinth / The Dark Crystal kind of has this weird Beatles Elvis vibe. You can like both of them, but you like one more than the other. And I am more of a Dark Crystal kid, but I also have a theater background, and boy, do the theater girls loves them some Labyrinth. So Labyrinth is not a movie that I watched an awful lot as a kid. I probably saw it maybe 2 or 3 times. I would always go with the Dark Crystal. But did I see that an awful lot in high school? Oh, hell yes. I certainly did. Any get-together at a person's house usually ended up with us watching Labyrinth. And or Pink Flamingos, but Labyrinth was usually a better choice because more people would watch it.
Brian,
I enjoy the movie. I enjoy it.
Brian, what's your history with Labyrinth and David Bowie's Bulge?
Oh. I don't have a history with his bulge.
I think we all have a history with the bulge.
We all have an intimate history of the bulge.
Yes.
I could definitely tell you, I'm pretty confident I did not see this in theaters. I could also tell you, for the sake of the 80s, it makes me sound like I'm a kid of the 60s. I don't remember much of the 80s, other than a handful of things, that sort of thing. I do remember having this on home video, watching it constantly. Again, for the sake of the 80s and whatnot, pretty much everybody outside of your standard regular channels had a VHS player or a recorder and had HBO, because you record everything off HBO so you could watch it later. I'm pretty sure I watched the hell out of this growing up and whatnot. It's always been a favorite of mine just because it does have that childhood, feeling to it, even though it is very scary at parts for a child. There are certain aspects of this movie that children should not watch, and
including David Bowie's bulge.
Maybe some creatures that like to dismember themselves. But yeah, it's one of those ones where I tell anybody, if you've never seen it, you have to see it. You have to be able to appreciate it for the movie of its time, for the Jim Henson puppetry and all of that. It's just a fantastical film.
Yeah,
I will say this one thing that I did notice that kind of shocked me after I was done watching the movie. I had always assumed that this was a Frank Oz movie. No, Jim Henson directed this.
Frank Oz.
That's insane.
Isn't Frank Oz part of the cast in some shape or something like that? But not.
Yeah, he did some of the puppeteering.
He is the wise man.
Yeah,
he's actually
just weird to me.
I did not grow up with this movie. This was one I had not watched until I met my now fiance Kayla. This and
you're also like 12. That's why.
When what? This came
you
out.
Didn't watch? No. Oh no. You weren't even born when this came out. I was gonna say that's why you hadn't. That's why you didn't grow up with it like we did.
Yeah, I don't know where you were going. I'm very confused.
You make us sound so old, too. I mean, next month, yes, I will be 42, but I don't think that's ancient or anything.
Corey, Brian, I don't think you guys are ancient. You guys are seasoned vets of the movie.
Oh, I like it. I like it. We're the seasoned veterans. I'm okay with that.
I'm the young buck trying to catch up to the bulge. I had not watched Labyrinth until just a few years ago, actually. And then since then, this has always been one that is on in our house constantly. Labyrinth. I never grew up with it, but you know what? I grew up a little bit with David Bowie, so that was very cool to have Bowie. This is one of my first introductions to Bowie, the actor, was this movie. But I never grew up with Henson really at all in my life. Strangely enough, Muppets was not a thing growing up for me that we had in our house a lot. I don't know why. But it was very rarely that I was watching Muppets or anything Henson related. But now since growing up, I have a brand new appreciation for Henson and all of his work. I've gone back to some of the Muppets movies and Labyrinth, and like Corey mentioned, Dark Crystal. There's just like, if I watched this as a kid, I don't know if I would appreciate it as much as I do now, because this was not the type of movies I was watching as a kid. But now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, I like these kind of movies, and I love Labyrinth. I love Dark Crystal. It's all the Puppeteer stuff. We'll get into that. But let's jump into the plot, and we'll get some thoughts out on this movie. So this follows Sarah, played by Jennifer Connelly, who is this girl who is like obsessed with fairy tales and magic and mysticism, and just wishes to ultimately kind of be a part of a fairy tale life in many ways. And this leads her to wishing that her baby brother that she has to spend the night babysitting is taken away by the goblins, and her wish comes true. Her wish comes true, and her brother is taken away by the leader of this group, the Goblin King Jareth, played by David Bowie, and she has to solve the series of riddles and solve this labyrinth to go ahead and rescue her brother and bring him back home. So that's the basic plot of Labyrinth. So one thing that I took away while watching Labyrinth this time is this has a very heavy Wizard of Oz vibe. That was the fantasy movie I grew up with, was the original, the Judy Garland Wizard of Oz. That was the fantasy movie that was on repeat in my house. And this has a very, very heavy Wizard of Oz vibe, but very, very much its own thing in the same way, because it's a very similar story where it's a girl goes into this fantastical world and has to find her way back home.
She didn't kill a witch on the way.
She did not kill a witch on the way. There is no David Bowie, obviously, in Wizard of Oz. But along the way, she meets these characters and befriends them and figures out that's the family she's always wanted. And the friends are always with you till the end type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. So watching that this time, it feels like this is if I compare Sarah to Dorothy in Wizard of Oz, Sarah feels like the better character to me. I don't know about you guys, but she feels like every step along the way she's figuring the stuff out. She's not relying on the Tin Man and Scarecrow and for them, or the fairy god, the Wicked Witch of the North and South and whatever. She's not relying on them. She's relying on herself, and that is a very big difference, I think, between the two characters, especially because they show Wizard of Oz early in the movie, the book version, and seeing how Sarah relates to Dorothy, it leads me to say, yeah, there's a lot of influence from that, but then I think Henson and everybody else involved really took heavy influence of that, but then took it, spun it their own way in many ways, and improved some of the things that they could with Wizard of Oz.
Oh, I would completely agree. I mean, Sarah's take, when going into this fantastical world, while she is herself trying to figure it out, she's not only not relying on these people from this world, but she's in fact actually probably the one to help them, to get them out of, certain weird pickles of situations, whatnot, especially Hoggle, because everybody loves Hoggle.
Yeah.
And it just, she's definitely the savior of these people to going against the Goblin King, as opposed to Dorothy going against the Wicked Witch of the West.
Yeah, and along the way, like she's figuring out all the riddles herself. Like she's figuring out how to get past the next step. It's pretty much everything is through her thoughts, her intuitions. Not really anyone else's, which is nice to have that a very strong character here at the center of the movie.
Or the fact that she figures out pretty quickly that they're screwing with her when they move the tiles around when she's trying to figure out how to get through the labyrinth.
Mm-hmm. She's a very, very smart character to have.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a thought that came to mind. But when I watched this, it felt very much like it was a little bit of Wizard of Oz, obviously. Like I said, obviously a lot of Henson with the puppeteering, but then I also feel there's a very heavy Monty Python vibe to this movie.
Oh, and I wonder why that would be.
I wonder why. It could be that one of the Pythons wrote the movie.
What?
And the late, great Terry Jones, who passed away just earlier this year. This has I did not notice it until this time, how much of a Python vibe this movie really has.
I definitely can see that. Okay.
Cory, what are your thoughts on that? I feel like you probably have similar thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was a topic that after I watched it, I kind of wrote what I don't call them reviews, but they're just kind of random thoughts on my viewing of said film. And it's kind of like, and I understand Time Bandits is a thing, but Time Bandits to me is a little too dark for most kids, whereas Labyrinth kind of has a more happy vibe to it. this is a Terry Gilliam movie for children, even kind of shot similarly. It just has that weird, chaotic, we're on a journey, you don't know quite where it's going, you know where the end is, but the journey itself is going to be completely and utterly weird, and you're going to love that part of it. And I don't know, I just kind of dug what they were doing. It was sort of, it meandered at times, and instead of cutting to the chase of, okay, well, we need to do this, this, and this, and then we get to the, Goblin King's lair, and then we're done. And no, it introduced these weird little strange characters, all the puppetry of these I don't know how to put it into words. It felt like a Terry Gilliam movie to me, and Terry Jones has always given me that vibe. So yeah. I don't know if that even made any sense.
No,
it's just kind of a rambling thing.
I think it makes sense, because I think that if, this isn't to take away from what Jim Henson did for this movie in terms of the direction side of it here, but I think that if you were to replace him and put, Terry Gilliam in this place here, maybe it might be a little bit more fantastical. But outside of that, I think you'd have relatively the same film, because it definitely has that vibe. In terms of, like you said, Time Bandits is a little dark for kids, and I would have to agree, because even I remember watching that as a kid. That is definitely a dark film.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is kind of in that same tone. It's a little bit lighter on the characters, what makes it not so dark. But it definitely has that same, like, you can definitely feel like the Monty Python is attached to this. And the funny thing is,
Right.
I really didn't think about it until you guys just literally brought it up. I'm like, that makes total sense. And like I said, I think this would be just as a great film if Terry Gilliam had made it, if it not had been Jim Henson. Like, I don't think anybody else could have made this movie if it wouldn't have been Jim Henson. That's who it should have been.
Well, yeah. Even if you look at like the Python stuff that Jones and Gilliam did together, they have a very similar vibe to each other's work, and that's where I think that definitely crosses over here. And the humor definitely crosses over into Labyrinth. Like, even the sequence where she's trying to figure out the riddle between the two characters that have the bars in their mouth and the one, that feels like a Python skit in many ways.
Oh, that totally looks like the kind of skit that if it wasn't a Jim Henson puppeteer type of film, that would have been literally a human face holding onto that into his mouth.
John Cleese and Eric Idle would be holding those in their mouth. Yes.
Yeah.
I just loved, because I don't know why I'd never really noticed that before, that Terry Jones wrote the movie. I just assumed it was Henson's work, and obviously story is by Henson, directed by Henson, and it's very much influenced by him. But I think having Terry Jones put it all together in terms of the script, and I think, I mean, briefly to go back to Tenet just really quickly, looking at what Nolan did there, directing, story, and screenplay, if he would have had someone else write his screenplay, he would have had something closer akin to what we're feeling now watching Labyrinth, where it feels like a complete movie. It feels like a collaborative effort, where Henson, I think, understood he probably wasn't the best guy to write the screenplay for it. So why not get Terry Jones to write?
Right.
Because Henson can handle the directing and the story, and obviously with this much, with 95% of your cast being puppets and guys in costumes, you need someone like Henson to do that part, and that's where you have Terry Jones do the script. I think it's brilliant work by everyone all around in this movie.
I would have to agree.
That's one thing I love watching Labyrinth, because I love the puppeteer work in this movie. It is fantastic. I think everybody in this movie is having a blast making it. Bowie looks like he's just king of the world, having so much fun.
Yeah.
David Bowie was king of the world. Knock it off.
He still is the goddamn king of the world.
That's what I'm saying.
And that was during his White Duke phase of. So this is the time where he kind of got to incorporate a little bit of that image, but also get a little bit more fun with adding stranger things to his persona. And I think that kind of added a little bit of a vibe to the character of the Goblin King. And I think we will get to the topic later, but I think that a little something extra had added a little bit more of a vibe to the Goblin King. But we'll talk about that probably in a few minutes here.
Yeah, I think we'll have to talk about it. Yeah, I just David Bowie. He's having a blast. Him just dancing with the puppets is such a great visual to me, because it's one, David Bowie's already feels like an alien, but to have him in his costume with that hairstyle, dancing with a baby with a bunch of Muppets around him is beautiful. I love it.
And I'm sure that this is a well-known fact, and I think it is. Yeah, I think I'm remembering this correctly. The baby in that is currently a special effects artist and worked on the Netflix Dark Crystal show.
He did. I looked him up. Toby was the design supervisor for the Netflix Dark Crystal. Like, pretty much, I was looking at his filmography. I'm like, okay, so where did he go from here, kind of thing? Because he's actually, he's primarily looks like he's a sculptor, fabricator in terms of special effects stuff. Like, because right now he's working on Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Ooh, okay.
Now I'm looking at this, and it intrigues me that like the path he took, because the only acting credit he has is Labyrinth, but otherwise he's basically been some sort of sculptor, creator, fabricator on Paranorm, the Box Trolls, Kubo and the Two Strings, Missing Link, and Dark Crystal. So it's not like he's got a these are not bad films he's been working on. So I mean, it's good to see that, you know, he's found his niche and he's part of some fantastical films. Like, it's kind of like where, I don't know, Labyrinth kind of shot him into being, okay, if I'm part of this fantastical world, that's where I want to be, and I want to help create that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really cool that he's, you know, obviously a few months old in Labyrinth, and now all these, you know, 30 years later, he's working on another Henson production in Dark Crystal. I think that's just a fun full circle to look at, and it obviously has to be him growing up watching Labyrinth as a kid, and the fact that, one, he knows he's in the movie. He probably watched the movie a lot growing up.
That's probably one of those things growing up going, do we have to watch this movie again? I know I'm in it. Do we really need to watch it? Like, I didn't do much.
Yes.
Or it's the opposite of, Mom, Dad, can we watch the movie I'm in again? Do we have to watch Labyrinth again?
Okay, so yes, there is the possibility of one or the other. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do think that is very fascinating that he ends up in the world of Henson all these years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cory, did you want to talk about the
bulge?
The bulge, yeah. Should we just jump into the bulge, guys?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, and then we'll jump into what Cory was briefly hinting at a few minutes ago. The bulge. Yeah, it's not as noticeable as memes make it out to be, but it is still noticeable. And
why does the bulge not have its own song in this film?
It was puppeteered by Jim Henson. Did you know that?
Because it would no longer be a children's film, Brian.
Oh, that's right. We were aiming for a kids movie. Okay, check. Gotcha.
I mean, if it actually was its own little puppet and it just popped out and started doing a song and dance, we'd be edging more into like Meet the Feebles territory. And I don't know if that would necessarily. Maybe it's a cut scene. I don't know. Who knows?
Go check see if there's any deleted scenes in my iTunes extras.
Yes.
Yeah, go look on the soundtrack. Bowie just has a deleted song from it, just called "The Bulge."
The Bulge. Welcome to the Bulge.
Yeah, but again, I think this leads to an interesting question that I will ask, but none of us can answer because it just wouldn't make any sense for any of us to answer. I will just leave it as a question, I think. this movie very much feels like a coming of age story for, early teenage girls. And I think that is why, one, the bulge is probably so prevalent. Two, it has the fantastical element of I'm going out into this fantasy realm, but then it is the only other human there is David Bowie, like an icon, an idol, a very handsome gentleman. And then along with that, there is the fantasy sequence of those two dancing together in this ball. And it feels like this is very much I got to try to find the right words for this, but basically like a teenage fantasy of what it means to fall in love in many ways. And I don't think any of us can really answer that because we're not teenage girls, nor were we ever teenage girls. But I think that is definitely something hidden within this movie.
Or
I don't even think it's hidden. I mean, there is a purpose to the fact that part of the fantasy he tries to trap her into is her as a princess at the ball, basically, essentially weirdly being seduced by the Goblin King, even though there is a gigantic age difference between the two of them. But that is the way that he was trying to get her to not break out of this prison that he put her in. And so, yeah, there is definitely that. Well, no, but we can be happy, and you have to give away all of your fun things, though, all of your toys that you have, and all the friends that you've made, and we'll be happy. And it turns out that no, the thing that made her happy were the friends that she made along the way. But no, it's true. It's it's all the comfort things. And it's weirdly kind of, and I may be stretching in this, but it is weirdly kind of a feminist film in that way, because it is showing that, no, she doesn't need this guy in order to be a complete person. The idea of it was kind of cool to her, but it was more about the relationships that she made with her friends that really brought everything and helped her through this journey, not and trying to get her brother, of course, but
that was after the fact.
Yeah, but it's a cool movie. It's a much cooler film than I remember, and much like I remember David Bowie's puppetry of the penis thing going on down there as being more. Yeah, but I remember it being more prominent. I don't remember the soul of this movie being as prominent as it is. And I mean, it's almost like it shouldn't be a bunch of dudes talking about this. It should be a bunch of ladies talking about this as to what this means. But, I guess you do have to have the male perspective on it too. But I think there's a reason that, like, a lot of the women that I was in theater with really attached themselves to this movie. So,
yeah, and I've had multiple conversations with Kayla on this movie, and I wanted her on this, but she has told me, no, I am retired from podcasting.
Oh, she's retired, huh?
She's retired from the podcasting. What's that?
I think she should be wrong, but that's just me.
Yeah, but Cory, you mentioned something a little earlier. What was that you were mentioning, and would you like to talk about it?
What was I mentioning a little earlier? I don't even recall. Dude.
Cory and I like to ramble, so you got to be more specific.
It was something that was going to help Bowie along the way, and everybody else along in this movie.
Yeah, you bring it up, and I will refresh my mind by you bringing it up. How about that?
I'm going to assume of what you were trying to go with. Was it a little something for them, helping them along the way?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. A little, special magic powder.
Magic
or no
white magic powder.
Yeah. Yeah, there is an element to this. Okay, I just watched a movie called Ice Pirates, and I hadn't seen that in years. And Ice Pirates to me is very much a coked out 80s film of all the studio executives had all this money, and stuff like Star Wars and Conan had done so well. So it's like, fine, we'll throw as much money as possible at whatever concept you have. It's fantasy. Why not? And yeah, there is an element of that to Labyrinth, and I think Jim Henson kind of was able to make a lot of films within that genre just because they were just throwing money around because they were coked out of their minds. It's like, well, maybe it'll hit or maybe it won't. Who knows?
Just give them some money.
Yep, just give them some money. And, you know, I'm not going to assume what Bowie's state of mind was in the film, but there is an element of the White Duke character that does have that little thing to it. So, yeah. What say you all?
I will say
I'm
that
trying
I
not
had
to dig myself in. I'm trying not to dig myself into a hole here. So
I will say up until the point where you actually brought up Ice Pirates on your social media that I had not thought of this movie in probably almost 2 decades.
Exactly.
Like most people are like, what the hell is this thing? And it's
space herpes. Space herpes.
It is, yeah. So
but go back to Labyrinth.
but I mean, and for the sake of Labyrinth, I mean, there's a lot of movies in the 80s where, and you imagine that Labyrinth is no exception to that the 80s were exactly what they were, and there's a number of movies that we could probably attribute to the great white monster taking forth and giving us some weird pieces of cinema. Maximum Overdrive would be
Peruvian marching powder.
Yeah, you know, Maximum Overdrive is a prime example of what Stephen King can make when he's coked out on his mind. You know?
And yeah, that's definitely a film. That's definitely a film that exists.
Right. Yeah. Because he's the only one that can make it.
All I will say is about it is it was the 80s.
Exactly. That's what that's what I'm getting at.
And the thing is there is so much about 80s movies that were children's films that just would not fly today.
No.
This is a film that is probably on the lighter side of the scale, but dude, yeah, as you mentioned before, there are little red creatures where their entire thing is ripping their own heads off and throwing them around and attempting to rip Jennifer.
Not even just their heads, their entire like bodies, full dismemberment. Even to the point where the guy like rips out his eyeballs and he's like looking around with his 2 fingers and whatnot. Like that shit creeped me the hell out as a kid. Like that was the one thing about that movie. Like it took me a hot minute as a kid to be able to get past that particular scene.
But that was the vibe in the 80s of it's PG, right. So it's good for you kids. But there's like there's like nudity and stuff in it. Yeah, it's good for you. Get hair on your chest.
Right. And I think that's one thing we're discovering.
Casey doesn't have like this vantage point of, I mean, you can go back and look at those movies and go, oh, yeah, that might be a little inappropriate, but you weren't 100% raised on just wildly inappropriate children's films, like The Secret of Nim, and even An American Tail is weirdly dark for a children's film. And
but so weirdly great, though.
Oh, yeah. And just a bunch of these things that Gremlins, sure, it's PG. Let's throw my 5-year-old in front of that. It's not going to traumatize them for the rest of their lives.
No, like the complete attack scene in the kitchen with the mom.
Yes, exactly.
Let's blow them up in the microwave.
And even though they try really hard to make the creatures in Labyrinth to be, likable, one of the main characters is just this big hulking monster that looks like, oh, we had a little bit of fabric from Snuffleupagus left over, so we made this thing. And this thing is adorable and it's endearing, but it's still kind of frightening.
I never saw Ludo that way. I saw Hoggle more frightening than Ludo.
Oh yeah, no, he is very frightening. But I mean, look at how he's introduced. There are people essentially torturing him while he's hanging upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes him endearing. We love him.
I know, right?
I want to give Ludo a big hug.
I know.
I have one more thing I wanted to bring up. And Cory, you will probably definitely be able to help me out with this, and Brian as well, because this is the 80s, 1986. There is a very popular horror series of this time, the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and I feel
I was just going to bring this up. Yep. Continue.
That series and this movie are intertwined in a very strange way, because the way that Sarah wins in the end is she says the line, "You have no power over me," which is the same line from 2 years earlier, 1984.
Yes.
A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is used to defeat Freddy in that movie. But then a few years after this is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, which ends in a labyrinth. Very strange that how much that series and this movie are intertwined that way.
Yeah,
and I swear,
coincidental.
Okay, I swear, and I might be completely wrong, and I didn't look this up because I was trying to get out of Sioux Falls and I didn't have a chance, and I didn't even think about it. But I swear that the person that plays the mom actually is a mom in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I might be completely and utterly mistaken though. She looks familiar, and I don't know where she is from. But the one that plays Sarah's mom is from something that I recognize, but I don't know what in the hell it is. And this is not the time and place for that. But I'm just saying.
Yeah. It's not one of the Elm Street movies.
That's my head.
No, it's not. I looked.
But yeah,
Okay.
I think it is strange that these two are so just intertwined in that way. And it could be purely coincidental.
What I think though, and Cory may or may not be able to allude to the same thing here, but the one thing about the 80s though, in terms of filmmaking and whatnot, is it does seem like it was a time of a lot of borrowing. You would see you'd see a lot of crossover from movies where it wasn't necessarily that they think they could do it better or whatnot, but hey, this worked over here, so I want to do this over here. Well, this worked over here, so I want to do it over there. I do think that there was a lot of that type of scenario coming out of the 80s and in those films and crossing genres and whatnot. So I would imagine this is probably just another sheer form of, we appreciated the movie, we liked this aspect of it, so we want to incorporate that into the Labyrinth.
And I don't know if it's necessarily a full-on cribbing of A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I mean, during the 80s, there were an awful lot of films of either, going into some foreign realm and getting lost in that, like Inner Space, Dreamscape, Labyrinth, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm sure that there are a bunch that I'm not even thinking of right now, but it was kind of a theme of, and I don't know if it was a political thing of trying to escape or just like xenophobia or what, like fear of the unknown or what, but it was kind of a weird theme, especially in like fantasy films of the time of we are here and then we are transported into a place that we have no understanding of, and we need to figure out a way of getting out of here. And that's kind of odd, but yeah, that is a weird linking factor. And both Casey and I love A Nightmare on Elm Street. We might disagree on what the best one is, but that's for another podcast that already exists.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we did that podcast.
I was going to say, you should go check out the Killer Countdown for A Nightmare on Elm Street. Unless you don't like A Nightmare on Elm Street, then probably don't do that. But it's fun.
Yeah, I think it's all like Brian said. Movies were kind of taking, and they still do this today. Take little elements here and little elements
Oh
that
yeah,
put it all together. I think in the end, it was all fair game because Labyrinth took that line.
Mm-hmm.
Nightmare on Elm Street and Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 is like, well, you took our line earlier. We're just going to take your entire third act. So that I think it's all fair.
right.
All right, so let's wrap up our chit chat on Labyrinth. Final thoughts. Obviously, we all will definitely recommend the movie. Do you guys have any other final thoughts on 1986's Labyrinth?
If you haven't watched it, you're wrong. No, it's a great, fantastic 80s movie. It's exactly what I would expect out of somebody like Jim Henson, David Bowie. For the sake of you comparing it to like Wizard of Oz, these are songs that get stuck in your head just as much as a couple of the songs that you would get from Wizard of Oz. But for me, I think I would rather get David Bowie stuck in my head for a song than something from the Wizard of Oz. So uh, yeah, it's a great fun film to be able to watch and enjoy.
Corey, what
Yeah,
about?
it's. I am glad that I had the ability to revisit this because I haven't seen it in probably 20 years, and I connected with it on a greater scale this time watching it. I noticed more of the themes. I didn't always just focus on the fantastical elements of it, and yeah, it's a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it in however long, give it a rewatch because it'll at least transport you into a different realm for an hour and 45 minutes, and you can escape reality and not be reminded of some of the crappy things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
So highly recommended, my fine fellows and audience members.
Yeah,
The fine fellows.
I'll echo what both of you guys said. It's a great film, holds up remarkably well. I think what will make this stand out, and is ultimately a testament to this movie and all the work that went into it. Is it has a great screenplay, has plenty of funny moments, has great characters.
Oh, yeah.
You connect with all the characters, but along with that, you have great practical effects that still hold up to this day. I think the sequence we kind of talked about with characters throwing their heads might be the weakest of it, but that's just some weird green screen. But it also adds a little nightmarish aspect to it. So
Very much so.
Works. So it still works, and I think this entire movie for that hour 45 works great, and still very much holds up to this day. Has a fantastic soundtrack. Yeah, it launched the career of Jennifer Connelly and is still gives us one of the most iconic characters in fiction with David Bowie's Goblin King. Yeah, it's a fantastic film all around. Highly, highly recommend. David Bowie's Bulge in Labyrinth.
Yes.
Bulge.
The Bulge. Yes, so that is Labyrinth. That was I'm so glad we got to talk about that on this show, and we're going to continue our 1980s miniseries. Going in next week, we talked a little bit about Wizard of Oz on this week's show. Next week, we're going to talk about the Return to Oz.
Return to Oz.
Yes! Dude, you totally just missed that there, Casey. This week we talked about Wizard of Oz. Next week we return to Oz.
We'll return. We never went to Oz. We're going to go to it next week. So next week is the Return to Oz. Very excited to talk about that one. Out of the 5 movies from this month that we're talking about in the 80s fantasy, Return to Oz is the only one I watched as a kid.
The Return to Oz is one of those movies where I tell people about the movie and they immediately are like, I didn't know there was a sequel to The Wizard of Oz. I'm like, oh, you're in for an amazing treat.
Yes.
And then they watch the movie and then realize, Brian, why did you give me so much nightmare fuel?
It is. Yes.
Because I love you.
Horrific.
Yeah, it
and
is.
I love every moment of it.
Yes.
All right. That's next week's Return to Oz, Nightmare Fuel Inbound. That is for sure. Again, let's wrap this up with what we got going on, and we'll give Corey a little platform here. First of all, what do you got going on, Corey, with everything in your movie watching?
Yeah, I have an Instagram account called Somewhat Random Movie Collection. It's on the aforementioned platform that I just spoke of, and I watch a lot of things. It's not a clever name. It's not like it's like the Shitty Beatles. It's not a clever name. I will decide a minute before I watch a movie as to what movie I'm watching. So yeah, come down and have the fun. It's a good time. I could watch A Secret of Nim tomorrow, and then watch Last House on the Left right after that, because that's just the way I roll, man.
Because that's why it's somewhat random.
Right.
The Shitty Beatles, are they any good?
Oh, they suck.
So it's not just a clever name then.
Yep.
And one movie I have a poster of right behind me, you just watched as well.
Lords of Chaos.
Yeah.
I think that's a movie that I need to sit down and I need to rewatch and not be, running on fumes, and hopefully maybe I can actually make it through the entire movie without feeling like I'm going to throw up.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff in that movie that is specifically the up close shots of dead self-harming that are just horrific. And yeah, that is a movie that I was very torn on. I have now come to terms with the fact that I do like it, but it was a roller coaster ride getting to that point. Because there's stuff in that movie that I think does not completely work. I think the tone is all over the place, but I think that the performances are wonderful almost all across the board. It has a fun direction by Jonas Ackerland, and it's just it doesn't quite know if it wants to make fun of the characters in Norwegian death metal or if it wants to take it entirely seriously, and sometimes it changes tones in the middle of a scene. And it's weird, I didn't make a reference to it in my post because it would take an awful lot to kind of explain it, but there's a weird part of me. I watched SLC Punk not too long ago, and this kind of has a weird vibe of it, and it even ends with a similar line of talking about posers. So yeah, go see Lords of Chaos. If you're in any way interested in Norwegian death metal, it's worth a watch. You might hate it, but at least it's interesting.
You come for the David Bowie, you leave for the Norwegian death metal.
Exactly.
Good call.
Yeah, so let's again go follow Cory on Instagram, Somewhat Random Movie Collection. Check out his post on Lords of Chaos. He talks all about it there. We should talk about what we got going on here and where you can find this podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, and on YouTube. And you can find us on backlot605.com. That's where you'll find our latest movie news, reviews, articles, discussions, and our weekly Coming Soon article, which we talked about this week. You can find the full rundown of everything coming soon on backlot605.com.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, and you can also check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we're trying to let you guys know when we know things going on and our reviews are going up and everything like that. Also, too, the South Dakota Film Community Group on Facebook. Check us out, join the conversation, tell us what you're watching, what's going on, that sort of thing. We'd definitely like to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. And again, like I had mentioned, next week, Return to Oz. If you are looking for that one, it is available right now on Disney Plus. So if you're looking for a place to watch it, that was probably the easiest place for everybody to go ahead, check out the film once again. Or if you have not seen it before, you're in for a ride.
You're in for a treat.
Yeah. Oh boy.
This is not your mom's Dorothy Gale.
No.
Well, the thing is Return to Oz, if you've gone and actually read the stories that were written, this is actually a closer representation of how damn strange the original Oz books were. Wizard of Oz is actually kind of normal compared to the books. So, yeah. Return to Oz. Oh boy, that's
We'll talk about it next week, but I had some eye-opening experiences after growing up with Wizard of Oz as a very young kid and then going into school reading Wizard of Oz and watching this movie. Changed my mind a little bit, but yeah, that's next week. Return to Oz. But again, this was Labyrinth. Go check it out. We all highly recommend it. Once again, thank you to Cory for coming on. We are planning our next one with Cory very soon as well, and we'll talk about it after the show between us. But yeah, we're planning to have Cory on very soon again.
Yeah.
But again, thanks, man.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Out,
for Brian Mensing, I'm Casey Kelderman. We'll check you out next time on the Backline of South Dakota.